So this is the finished product we're going to be designing here. You can see it's a fully responsive layout. It's built with CSS Grid and flexbox. You can see as I resize down here to a mobile menu, everything collapses, everything kind of reorients itself, and I can scroll back up here to my full size. We have our rollovers in place, etc., etc. All right, and welcome to part 2. So in the previous part, we went ahead and did the CSS using the CSS Grid and built this entire, what I call a CSS wireframe inside of our code here. We built the responsive, we did the media query through the responsive version as well. And now we're going to turn this wireframe into our full-fledged mockup that we designed here in XD. So we're going to be essentially going from this to the full entire mockup. Now, we went ahead and exported all of the assets for this specific mockup a few videos back if you've been following along in the series. I think the one I missed in a previous video was this little featured image right here. So I've gone ahead and exported that, but you'll need to make sure you have all the logos and all the images and things ready to use in the next portion. So let's go ahead and get started. So you'll notice here the one change is I now have an images folder set up inside of my little root directory here. And inside of that images folder are all of my 1 and 2x graphics that I'll be needing to mock this up. And that's what we did from the export. So let's go ahead and get started. Now I like to work in a top-down fashion, so I like to just start on the header and just flesh everything out all the way top-down, left to right. So that's where we'll begin. So I'll just kind of rearrange this a little bit, scoot this over, and let's get started. So we're going to cruise down here to our header area, and we're going to start to swap things out. So for the header, I'm going to set my background color to white and hit save there. And then we're going to kind of look at one little adjustment we need to make. So you can see right now our header area is going completely 100% wide. But if I come over here and I look at my mockup, the header area actually is confined. So my mockup is actually slightly wrong. So this, in other words, this div here, right, is kind of more like this. That's the way my header is behaving because it's centered locked as well. So I'm going to make that little adjustment here. So in other words, we need to come over to our grid template area property and modify this. So the header is going to have a stretchy one on that end and one on this end, and then save. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Whoops, one too many. I forgot to delete that guy. There we go. Okay, so we have a stretchy, and then the header spans those 4 in the middle. And then that is looking proper for us now. So let's come over here to our HTML, and let's delete this word header and replace this with the actual code we're going to need. Now, our header, of course, is made up of a logo and then 4 menu items. So we have our logo over here. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so we can see this a little bit better. We have our logo, and then we have 1, 2, 3, 4 menu items. So that's what we're going to be replicating in our HTML. So the logo is going to be an image tag. So I'm just going to say image source equals, and I'll set this equal to images. And I'm going to use my logo at 2x in this instance so I can kind of build a little bit more of a responsive image for high density displays. And I'll say alt equals, I'll just call this the logo. And then let's just leave it like that for now and save and make sure we're getting that to load. Now you'll notice the logo comes in way too big. And that's because when we exported our assets, we exported 1 and 2x versions of our assets. So we need to select this guy, and you can see that its width is 85 pixels. So when I come into this, I'm going to modify this in CSS to make sure it's only 85. So I'm going to give this guy a class as well, and I'll just call this the class of logo. And that should be fine. And we'll do that CSS here in just a second. And then we're going to have an unordered list. And inside of that unordered list, we have some list items. I'll use Emmet here so we can do li sub a. We can actually do li times 4. So we're going to have 4 list items, and they're each going to have an anchor tag. We can do something like that to make that a little easier. And then for right now, I'll just do pound signs in here to leave these guys blank. And I don't even know what I called these. Let's go look. So about, contact, blog, and sign up. So we'll call this one about, contact, blog, and sign up. Okay, we'll save that. And that will be fine. So we're going to give this guy this unordered list. We're going to give it a class of nav. Now, you could also, if you want to get fancy, you can wrap this thing. For example, we could have a nav tag. That's the HTML5 tag is a nav, so you could wrap this in a nav tag. I'm not going to be using HTML5 tags because we're just kind of learning the structure here. Just like I could replace this with a header tag, right? And I could replace my content area down here. Instead of div, I could have this be a main. Or maybe I could have each of these, instead of being divs, I could have them be section tags, right? So however you want to mark that code up to make it more semantic, definitely do on your own. But that's kind of up to you. So let's go ahead and now flesh this out. So we have our logo and we have our nav inside of there, our unordered list. And let's go modify this. So we're going to just kind of, I'll come maybe right to here. So we're going to say header and logo. So this rule right here will only affect the logo that's a child of the header. You don't have to write descendant selectors. I'm just kind of doing that so you can kind of visualize also the hierarchy here in the CSS. And we're going to say width is, I think it was 85 pixels. Yep, that looks correct. Okay, so there's the logo there. And then we'll do one more here for our header nav. And for right now, I'm just going to turn on outline of 1 pixel solid, I don't know, blue, let's say. Now I actually can't see this nav, my own unordered list in here. And that is likely because it's underneath. It's somewhere down here because this is only has 100 pixels height. So it's probably hiding down in there somewhere. I don't know. So what we need to do is start messing around with our flexbox properties. So inside of the header, remember this header is a child grid item, but we're also going to convert it to be a flexbox wrapper. Okay. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to come over here to our CSS and down here in our header, our main header right here, we're going to set it to have a display of flex. So it's kind of interesting because it's behaving as a CSS flex item, grid flex item, but it's also going to behave as a CSS flex parent. And you can do that. They can behave as both. Okay, so it's going to be set to display flex, and you can see as soon as I do that, these items, sure enough, they come up and they stack left to right. That's the way Flex does by default. Flex will take a row of items and convert them to columns by default. Okay, next we're going to say align items center. And what this is going to do is it's going to use, that's vertical alignment. So that makes the space on the top and the bottom equal. So they're aligned in the center. That's something we couldn't previously do without Flexbox, aligning things in the vertical center. The next thing we're going to do is say space between, and we're going to be, whoops, not sure why that's not highlighted. Not sure. Space between, we're going to set, oh, that's why I'm getting ahead of myself. The property name is called justify content. We're going to set that one to space between. And what that does is it forces them to have the same distance between them. Now, because we only have two items, this kind of forces one all the way to the left and the other one all the way to the right, which is kind of a nice little effect there of that Flexbox. If we had three items, then they would sort of be one in the left, one in the middle, and then one in the right. They would each have the same space between them. That's what that property does. Okay, so that works pretty well for us, and that's pretty much all we need. So now we're going to work on this area over here. So now we're going to write another rule. We actually already have it right here for our header nav. So let's come into this guy, and we're going to make it, I'm going to zoom in a little bit here on the, whoops, not on this screen. I'm going to zoom in a click or two over here on our mockup, just so you can see that a little better as we start to flesh this out. There we go, something right there. So this guy is also going to be behaving as a Flexbox item as well. So let's go ahead and convert it. So I'm just double checking my notes here, make sure I didn't miss anything on that header. And it doesn't look like it. Okay, so we gave that guy, I think, let's make sure I have a class of nav. Yep, the unordered list has a class of nav. So the first thing we want to do is remove the bullets. By default, unordered lists have bullets. So we're going to say list style, and we'll set that to none. So there's no bullets. Then we're going to remove the default margin. So we're going to set that to 0. Actually, it's not margin, sorry, it's actually the padding. So set the padding to 0, and now you can see it's taking up the proper amount of space there. So that is good. And that's really all we need to do on our nav, okay? Now let's go ahead and convert the header. So again, I'm doing descendant selectors. There's some good arguments on why it's not a good idea to make your CSS so specific. But we're going to ignore those for this purpose. So this is going to affect all the anchor tags that are children of the nav, that are children of the header. So if we go back to our HTML, this is going to affect each individual anchor itself. Okay, so all of our anchor tags. Are next. So let's work on those. So we need to get rid of that underline on those guys. So that's going to be a text decoration of none. Okay, the next item we're going to do is add some flex properties to this nav so that instead of stacking again in rows, they'll stack in columns. So we're just going to simply say display flex. Again, the default of that, you can see, just lines them automatically up in columns. Now notice that it automatically also centers our menu, and that's because we're using that align item center on the flex parent. So that's also a nice little feature there. Okay, now we just need to work on our anchor tags. So I'm going to get rid of this outline. We really don't need that anymore. That was just to kind of visualize to see how that menu is changing as we modified it. And let's go ahead and move down here to our header nav A. Okay, so with this element, we're going to give this guy a border of 2 pixels solid. And then here's where we're going to jump over to XD and we're going to copy this color. So this fill color here, we're just going to copy this color and jump back over here. That's going to be the border color. That's perfect. Now we're going to set our border dash radius to 50 ems. What this does is it's kind of a bit of a hack, but it makes it so that it has the pill, the rounded pill corners. You can see that change happen over there. We're going to set the color of the actual text to that same color. And then we're going to mess around with our padding. Now you can come over to XD, and if you come in here and select an item and you hold down the Option or Alt key, you can get your little measurement values. So if I come in here and I hold down Option, you can see it'll do these little quick measurements for you. So I can, select this guy and kind of see, oops, if I jump right there. So there's 15 pixels you can see on the top. I can't move the mouse. 15 on the bottom. You can kind of see the padding there. So what we're going to do is then replicate that in here as well. So the padding on the top and bottom was 15 pixels. On the left and right, I think it was about 30 pixels. Let's just double check that. I already forgot. Yeah, 31 pixels. So 30 actually. And you can see now I have the correct spacing all the way around those guys. And then we can do the same thing. We can come over here and measure the distance between a couple of these guys. So if we grab this one and this one, so that's 16 pixels in between the two. And we're going to set that up with margins. So we'll come back here and add the margin, 0 on the top and bottom, and 15, was it 15 or 16? I already forgot. It was 16. So we'll come over here and make that change. So 16 pixels and then refresh, and that's going to space out those middles to each have 16 pixels. Actually, that's a lie. You can see that there's a left margin and a right margin. So that's actually 16 plus 16. And I want the overall to be 16. So I need half that value. So that value would actually become 8 pixels. There we go. And that's now looking correct. Okay. So that's looking pretty good for our logo there and the menu. So now we need to change a few things here still. Let's go ahead and change the text transform. We're going to set to uppercase and save. And that's going to make our text, of course, be uppercase, which we want because that's how we have it in our mockup is uppercase. And we also want the font weight to be bold. So let's go font weight, bold, and save. And now we have that bold font. And that should be mostly all we need to do there for our menu. Now let's go ahead and set up the hover states. So I'm going to set up a rule right below this one for the header nav a : hover. So this is the pseudo selector for the hover state. And if we come over here to our mockup, you can see the hover state has a solid background with white text. So let's make that adjustment. So we're just going to change the background dash color is going to be set to this exact same value right there. And we'll override the color of the actual font to be white and save. Now we can go ahead and test this out in our mockup, and that looks perfect. Now our hover state is also going to be our active state. So I'm also going to do this as a group selector. So I'll hit comma here and call this one dot active, or you could call this dot current or whatever, however you want to call it. I'll just call mine active. And then just to test that out, now what we can do is we can go over to our HTML. Let's come over here to an anchor tag and give one of them the class of active. And you can see now it's solid there. Now I'm not seeing the white text because I have a specificity issue. I need to make this rule the same specific as this one. So in other words, I need to make it a descendant selector as well. So header nav, then active, and save. There we go. So you can see now that's actually showing up as we expect. So I can add that active tag on any of those current pages to make them be highlighted when I'm on the current page. So that's looking great. Now let's move down to the featured header right here. So we'll go ahead and get rid of this background color. Instead, we want a background image. And this is going to be a URL, and it's going to go to images. And I can't remember what this one was even called, probably featured. Let's guess. Let's see if that's the featured image. Featured and save. It is. Okay, so we got lucky there. So there's our featured image, but you can see one problem is this image is repeating, right? It repeats over here indefinitely. That's the way background images work. Now the reason we're using a background image on this element instead of an image in our HTML is because in CSS we can do some fancy stretching. So I can set this guy to have the background size property of cover and save, and now you can see it's going to automatically stretch. So let's go ahead and check this out. You can see as I'm resizing the browser window, that image stretches or shrinks to automatically fill up the space, and it automatically maintains its aspect ratio, which is exactly how I want that to behave. So that works great there. That's really all we need to do on that element. Let's come into our index now, and let's just get rid of that little boilerplate text right there and save. Okay, next let's move down to the main area. Now the main area has a few elements inside of here. You can see we've got likely a header 1 tag for the main title, paragraph of text, and then some little button that's a call to action. So I'm just going to copy this, and we'll come over here to our featured main. So we're going to have a header 1. Whoops. And this is going to say, I don't know what it said, welcome to the mockup or something like that. Okay, we'll paste in all that text for the paragraph. And there's the paragraph. And then we'll have also, after that, an anchor tag. So we'll call this href equals, just leave that blank again. And this is call to action. And we'll save that. Okay, so there's the HTML tags we need inside of our featured. And now we'll go ahead and style these. I'm going to give this anchor tag a class of button, BTN. Okay, so let's jump over here to our CSS, and we'll mock this up. So for our featured area here, featured main is what this is. Let's go ahead and get rid of the background color. And let's check out our mockup to see what color that needs to be. It looks like ours is just empty, yeah. So that's fine. Now we have this red background color clear from our wrapper. Now's a good time to probably change that. So we can come clear up here to our site wrap. Background color, we're just going to set that to white. There we go. Now we can come back down here and continue working on that section. Okay, so we'll write a new rule here. This is going to be the featured main sub h1. So this is the main header. And let's see what we need to do with this. So back to XD, let's go ahead and grab the color here. So I'll grab this color because it's not black, it's like a slight gray. And we'll say color and just paste that in. That looks good there. And then we will, is it uppercase? Nope, that's normal. Looks like we'll make the paragraph next. So we'll say dot featured underscore main, all the paragraphs in that area, they're going to have the same color. So they'll look like that. That looks fine enough for now. Of course, we can modify this as we need. And then we'll work on the button. So .btn. So this is going to be similar to our button that we created up here. So I'm going to copy a lot of this stuff here and paste it down here, because it's going to be very similar. It's just going to have different colors. So I'll save that. And now let's go grab the right colors. So it looks like it is... There we go. We'll grab this color here and jump back over here. I just copied that. So it's going to have that color. Color is going to be white on this one. And the background color we need to add is going to be the same color. Okay, we'll save that. And there's our little call to action button. Now we can align this thing with... we could align it with flexbox or margins and push this kind of around. We could even float it to the right. If this is a little easy way, we can just say float right and jump that guy clear over to the right side. So we'll just do that for now. Okay, so there is that section all completed for us. And that looks fine. Now, one thing we need to change at this point is you'll recall that in the earlier, clear up at the top here, when we were setting up our rows, we gave them explicit heights. And I told you in the last video we were going to eventually end up changing that. So instead of saying 373 pixels, I can change this to min-content. And what that means is it's going to be a minimum height of at least the height of the content. That way, if the content stretches or grows, the div automatically stretches and grows. So watch what I mean here. So I'm just going to maybe copy this header 1 tag and just paste it a bunch of times. Kind of show you this. Now I save and notice that that just automatically stretches, right? That height of that row. And that's what that min content does. If we left that before at the fixed height and refreshed, notice how everything is cut off and it's actually hidden. It's underneath the other elements. All the other stuff's down here invisible. So that's why we want to make this stretchy. Oops, I just undid that twice by setting that to min content, okay? And the same concept is going to apply down here to our content div. So I'm going to copy that, and this one will also be just set to min content. Perfect. Okay, now let's come over here and we'll delete all these header ones that I added. That was just to kind of illustrate that little point there. Okay, now let's work on the profile area. So that one should be fairly simple because all we have inside of here, we'll delete the text, is we just have an image. So we'll just write image source equals, it's going to be images, and it's going to be the profile. We'll just do the 1x for now. I'm not going to do the 2x, and I'll say alt equals profile and save that. So there's our profile image that gets dropped in there. Now we can go ahead and modify that profile image with some padding or whatnot as we needed. So that's the featured profile div. So I could come over here to featured profile. Where is it? Still down a ways. There we go. And we'll get rid of the background color blue, right? We don't need that anymore. And maybe we want to give it some top. It's kind of bumping right up against the top and bottom edges. So maybe I'll give this guy some padding on the top of, I don't know, 2 M's and 0 on the left and right or something. Something like that. Maybe I actually want some on the left and right. Maybe 1 M on the left and right. However you want, right? You can just space that padding around on that div to space that guy out, however you want. Okay, so there is that element. 2 more elements and we're done. So now we're going to move down here to the content area, which is this one. So right now it's a background color of black. Let's delete the default background color. And we're going to come over here to our HTML. And in the content area, let's jump over to our XD mockup. You can see we have 1, 2, 3, 4 images, right? And we're going to use flexbox to lay those out as well. So we'll come over here and let's just add these. So image source equals, we'll add 1, then copy and paste. So there's, I just named them 1, 2, 3, 4 on mine to show this, and I'll give it an alt of 1. Okay, so I'll copy this one and we'll paste, paste, paste. So we have 4 images. I'll hurry and rename these. 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and save. So there's all the images. By default, they pop all down in that area. And what I can do is on this content area here, I can basically make that be a grid container as well. Not a grid container, a flexbox container. Kind of just like we did in the header. So I'll set this guy to display of flex. And you'll see by default, they all now bump up together. And now I can just use margin or padding to, give these guys 0 on the top, I don't know, 5 pixels or something on the left and right, which didn't do anything. Oh, we need to do this. Let's not do this on here. Sorry. We need to set up a new rule for the images. Now we can say content image tag, because they're all image tags. And now we can say margin 0, 5 pixels. There we go. So now you can space those out however you want. Of course, maybe I want some bottom margin on this guy as well. So I could probably say, if I want 4 borders, I can say 0. So it's top, right. It's like a clock. You start at noon. So it's top, right, bottom, left. So top 0, right. And I could say bottom is 2 ems and then 5 pixels on the left or something like that. And now I have that bottom border down there to kind of separate it out from the footer. And that's pretty much it for the images. So right now they don't click, of course, but if you wanted to add anchor tags, wrap each of those images in anchor tags to make them click to full size versions or something like that, you're more than welcome to. And let's go ahead and come over here to our index. And the last thing here is the footer. So all we're going to do is just add a copyright. So we'll say ampersand copy, which is the HTML entity for the actual copyright sign. We'll say copyright 2020 Cool Corp. There. Okay, so there's our little copyright notice down there. Now we could just go ahead and style this guy in the footer, which is right here. So I don't know what color we want this. Dark gray. Is there a color called dark gray? There isn't. So let's just make it, we'll say, I don't know, pound 333 maybe. And then we'll maybe make the color gray. Actually, we should make the color. Yeah, that works. And then maybe we want to center it. So we can say text align center, something like that for a copyright notice. We could add some padding there to space this thing out as well. We could say padding top of, I don't know, 2 ems is again. Anyway, they can mess around with that to place that however you want. And that's pretty much it. So we now have the full mockup from our XD. Let's just double check to make sure we didn't skip anything in here. So we have our logo, we have our menu, there's that, that. Yeah, it looks like it's it. So let's double check it. So we're gonna come over here to our browser now. Let's pull this so we can get a little bit fuller of a screen, and we'll switch into responsive mode. So we're gonna inspect the element here, and let's resize this and see how it's working. So as we stretch all the way wide, we can obviously see how that works. And as we come in, you can see that that stretches, our content stays in the middle. Once we get down to our mobile breakpoint, you can see right here we've got some issues because our breakpoint doesn't hit until right there. But now we break into our mobile size, everything stacks in a single column, which is perfect. And now we just have to build our mobile menu. So we are almost there. Okay, so that's looking pretty fine. Of course, we'd probably want to maybe shift this, and in mobile media query, we want to maybe make all those images stack horizontally or whatever you want to do at this point, but the main divs are working correctly. Okay, so we're near the end. Now let's just fix up this last little menu in our media query. So we'll come down here to the media query, and in mobile, we're going to come up here to where we created all that stuff and copy it. So we will copy all of the, and just as an FYI, I have like 2 or 3 videos that detail how to build mobile menus, really fancy ones with animations and hides and slides and all sorts of things. We're just going to do a very basic one in this video today. So, getting myself sidetracked. Let's see, what are we trying to find here? So I'm going to copy all of the text for this nav. So I'm going to grab this header nav, or not the text, all the CSS. And down inside of here, we'll say display flex still, but instead of having it flex out in columns, we're going to have it flex in rows. So there's several ways we could do this. We could change the flex direction. So in flex direction, we can switch this instead of rows or instead of columns to rows. This actually, we need to pull this over in our mobile view so we can test it. So we'll come all the way down to here and let's, okay, refresh. Okay, so if we switch from row to column, you can see that they all automatically stack up like so. And now we just really need to increase the header height. So we need to override on, you'll recall up here, I'm trying to go way up to show you this. We have a fixed size, right? We have this grid template rows setting that first one to 100 pixels. So we're going to copy that guy and come down here to the bottom. We also need to override this. That's inside of our site wrap. And we're going to call this one min content as well, so that it will stretch out there. Okay, now the problem here is by default, anchor tags are inline elements, and they need to be block elements in order to have some margin padding to force those guys. So we can come back up here to our header anchor nav rule, and we're going to add in the display of inline dash block. So this allows them to be both inline and block at the same time. And you can see now that forces their hand there. So I'm going to copy this rule and we'll just make a couple little modifications down here in our media query again for our nav. And we're just really just going to give them a tiny bit of margin. So we'll say margin of, I don't know, 1em or something like that. That's too much. We'll say 0.5. Okay. So that's looking pretty good for our mobile media query. Again, I'm not doing the collapse and the hamburger menu and all that fancy stuff. That would take a good another 30-45 minutes to go over all of that CSS. And again, I've got the videos already on that. So let's just go ahead and check this out now. So here we go back up to our desktop version. You can see it responds. Things are shrinking and growing as we expect them to. Let's actually move this all the way over so we can see this one last time. All the way up, they stretch to a certain size, then grow down here. Once we hit that 480 point, our breakpoint comes into place. This switches to a horizontal menu so I can still see all those buttons. My logo stays in place, and then all the content is still there and visible as well. So the last thing we probably would do is write on all of these elements right here, which are inside of that. They are the content. Where did we put those guys? Oh, the content area right here where they're all saying display flex. We could do the same thing and override content instead of having those guys be display flex. We could set that differently. I'll just show you how you can quickly do that. So we could say display flex, and then again, change this right here. We don't need to override that. And then when we come down here, they should switch. There we go. So now they all switched and stacked on top of one another instead of sideways. So that's probably it for the mobile media query. I won't do any more customizations. You can, of course, play around with everything. But now we do have at least a responsive site that will work on mobile phones, tablets, and desktop, and with not that much CSS code in that media query. I mean, we only have 20 or 30 lines here, which is very, very small. So that's looking pretty good. Just as kind of a last thing here to show you on our XD mockup. So this particular mockup, right, we sort of had this layout, but on this mockup here, we have a background color. This one, we have a background repeating pattern. They've all kind of got, slightly different layouts, but really because we stuck to that 6-column, 4 columns in the middle, basic grid pattern, I can recreate all of these layouts with very easy minimal changes. I essentially just need to change. The only property really I would be messing around with is this property right here, right? Just adjusting how those columns fit inside of my grid template areas. So I'll just maybe showcase how I can put in a full screen background image. So let's just grab this one. I'll quickly export it and we'll show you how that looks. So I'm just going to say File, Export here, and export the selected image. And then that exported this over here. So I'm going to put it inside of my little folder. where we have this guy. So I'll come in here, come into images, and sure, background works just fine. I'll save this for the web as a JPEG and hit export. Okay, so let's double check, make sure we have that image inside of our images. So there's the background. Okay, perfect. So now all I do is I can come up to my body tag and I can give this guy a background-image. And I'll just set this to the URL and we'll say images and we'll go down here to our background. There it is, bg.jpg. Okay, and we'll save. Now I can't see it right now because I have white set as the background color on the site wrap. So I can delete that. In fact, I'm actually going to cut this out of the body and put it in my site wrap instead. They'll both actually do the same thing. And there you go. So you can see I can set that in my site wrap. And now it behaves the same way. Now, if I want it to grow and shrink, you see the same issue here where it's repeating over here. So it's the exact same concept before. I can set the background size property to that cover value. And now it will just grow and shrink as my browser is resized, right? So that background image just reflows into there. And that's how you can do something like that if you want a full screen background image in your website. Now, a couple of these designs in XD also have some semi-transparency like this one right here. So if I wanted to do that, just to illustrate, I'll just do this in this header section to illustrate this. If I come down here to my header, I can set, instead of having background color of white, you can set this to have an RGBA value. So red, green, blue, alpha. So I'll set it to black. So 0, 0, 0 is black. And then I'll say 0.25. It's supposed to be 0.25 to be correct technically, but both will work. Meaning 25% transparency. So now when I save, you can see I've got this black background, but it's semi-transparent. And you could do that right on any single element you really want to do. So that's how you can easily just add full screen backgrounds and make things semi-transparent to have images shine through other areas. But you can see with just a few little modifications there, you can really create. I'm going to undo some of those changes that we just made. Lots of different layouts. So it wouldn't be that hard to recreate all of these variations in our mockups with just a few little modifications. So that is our fully working mockup. Let's actually now launch this guy full screen in the browser and see what it looks like. So this is the finished product we're going to be designing here. You can see it's a fully responsive layout. It's built with CSS Grid and flexbox. You can see as I resize down here to a mobile menu, everything collapses, everything kind of reorients itself, and I can scroll back up here to my full size. We have our rollovers in place, etc., etc.